Good morning.
Good morning.
Very glad that both of you could come today. I've had some good conversations with each of you before, and I often think that when you actually get to sit down and talk, that's a very, very good sign of both of you wanting to see whether you can achieve the goals that you identified when we talked before. You want to start off?
It's very nice to meet you. My name is Elizabeth Brazier, and I'm Vice President for the project development.
Leonard Wilkins. I'm a representative of the community.
So before we begin, I'd like to just go over the background of what we're doing today, a little bit about the process. I realize it could be somewhat repetitive, but I think it's important that you hear the same thing from me at the same time, although I've told you this or explained it when we were meeting privately. So, as I mentioned before, I am working for a private firm that provides assistance to people who have either significant problems, disputes, or conflicts. My role is to help you try to find solutions that will work for both of you. So I am not allied or connected with either of you, but I would say the term sometimes is multi-partial. In other words, I'm partial to you and I'm partial to you. I'm trying my best to try to help you find solutions that will work. So the mediation process, sometimes it's also called facilitation process, is a forum, a place where you can sit and talk. You can identify the issues that are important for you to discuss. You can talk about what you need and what you have as interests, which are wants or desires or expectations. But you can explain that to each other. And then we can try to look at solutions, things that will work for you, that will address those particular things. In the process, I will, for the most part, probably stay out of the substance. In other words, I certainly won't tell you what to do. I might, if there's an area that I think might be helpful, I might make one or two suggestions. But a lot of my role will be focused on the process of what we'll be working on today. Let me just stop there for a minute and see whether are there any questions right now about what I've just said, and then there are a few more things before we actually start talking about what you're concerned about. Any other questions?
No, I'm fine at the moment, thank you.
Okay. There may be a time when I would like to meet with each of you separately, and that what I wanted to just be clear at the beginning, that if I do that, it's not because I'm out making a deal. It may be if you need time to just gather yourself, time to consider what's at the table, time to develop a proposal to bring back to us. I may ask you to meet separately, and if I meet separately with one of you, I'll meet separately with the other. This also relates to confidentiality, that although we could have had this meeting with a lot of the community members here and some of the executives from the company, we discussed earlier that what we would do is have you as representatives, and then you'd be able to check back with your community members and your colleagues if we need to. My assumption is that you have some authority here, that if we come to a point where we've developed some solutions that are workable, that you probably could reach an agreement here. Is that an accurate assumption?
That's correct.
Yes.
All right. The meeting itself here when we're together is confidential, which means that I won't go and talk with people outside about what either you said, or I can talk generally about what you did, but I will never attribute anything to either of you. Obviously, it would be helpful for a period of time of these talks, if we have multiple meetings, that you maintain to some degree confidentiality. You obviously have to go back and talk to some of your community members, but it would be very helpful if you did not talk with the press while we are doing this, and that if you can agree to that confidentiality, it will be very helpful.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about how we talk. And whenever we're discussing things like this, it's helpful to have some guidelines about how we talk. Do you have suggestions about what would be helpful to each of you to have good, open, and productive conversations with each other? Is there anything that you could suggest as essentially a meeting guideline that would be helpful to everyone?
Well, I think it's clear that we have both our interests at heart, and we're both here to represent the company, you, your community. And I think as long as we are clear that we are the representatives for what we think is correct procedure, I think that we can have a very open discussion about how we can move forward in a positive kind of way.
I agree with that. As long as everyone's being heard, then I have no problem with it.
Okay, so basically represent views and to be heard.
Yes.
Others?
The big things for me is being heard, because a lot's been done without a consultation, and we want our views to be heard and respected. So
it's important that the company hear what
Yes.
the community is concerned, and also it sounds like respected.
Yes.
It's important to note that I think you can be respectful and not necessarily agree,
Yes.
but it is basically respected behavior. What would that look like? What is it if it's respected behavior?
Well, not dismissing any of our traditions, any of our cultures, or how we live.
Okay.
And understanding the human aspect. It's not
Okay.
just dollars and cents sometimes.
Okay. That's an important piece. And that probably goes both ways. I mean, it's the human aspect for the company, the people who are there, the people in the community, and also be respectful for the particular issues and concerns that each of you have. I assume that you're here in what we call good faith, which means that you'll put forth the best effort you can to try to find solutions that will work for you. I'd like to believe I'm sitting on the same side of the table of both of you at the same time. Hard to do sometimes, but that will be the goal. So let me talk about the process that we go through, and then I want you to start talking about the issues. At this point, what I'd like to do is to have you do sort of an opening broadly about some of the things that are important to you and that you want to discuss. Once we've gone through that, there'll be some time for questions and answers so that both of you are clear what we're working on. And you can ask each other the questions, and I will do the same, but hold off until you've heard from each of you. And then what we'll do is we'll try to decide which issues you'd like to talk about first. I think if we made some progress on, both of you would be able to go back to your community, you'd be able to go back to the company and say, we've made some good steps forward, and these are either agreements that we've reached or tentative things that we need to discuss, and then we'll come back and talk about them some more. So my expectation is by the end of this session, ideally we'll have a broad understanding of what we're doing, and second, we will have picked several issues. We will have examined those issues to find out what's important to you, what is it that you are concerned about, worried. Sometimes we use the word interest, which is what is it that you'd like to get out of some kind of agreement. Ideally, we will have generated some solutions, tested them out, and seen whether we can find some things that work. When we begin, the question is always, who do you start with? And I think since the community has been the one that has raised a lot of these issues, I would like to have them start, and the company has agreed that if the community will start, that would be fine with them. I'd like you to talk generally, because I know this is really important to the community.
Yeah. Well, we're a community around 4,000 people. My family, we've been here for at least 6-7 generations. We're cattle ranchers. We love our land. It's a very special community that we have here, where everybody's looking out for each other, and it's beautiful. We're just scared that big companies come in, buy land, set up shop, bring in all these strangers. So many farm workers aren't able to work anymore because the owners of the land have sold it. I'm sorry.
It's hard.
It's very hard seeing lives and families destroyed. Like women who would go and work in the fields and sell the produce and everything, they are out of work because now those fields aren't there for them to work on. Generational wealth, which was trying to be developed, it's lost because now some people who have sold the land, they didn't realize what they're denying their children. It's just very tricky because we weren't consulted. Just because we're not recognized, it doesn't mean we're not here. we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. There's a company with the lawyers, but this is the truth, with their lawyers and with all their bureaucracy coming in, making deals with the government, and we're not even part of that.
So let me see whether I can summarize that. You're concerned about the beauty of this place and that historic connections and the lifestyle that you've had before. There have been changes, and you expect that there will be changes. So the question is, how do you address some of those things? And this involves probably some of the land has been lost, or the use of that land has been lost. It also sounds like you're concerned about the economic impact that having foreign workers, foreign meaning they're not necessarily from outside the country, but they're outside of this district, that they come in and they earn more money than locals do, which means prices often go up. I appreciate your waiting and also listening, but I think it's important to know some about the mine, a little bit about the background of it coming in, and some of the things that are of most concern to all the people in the mining community, which basically means your executives and your workers.
Of course. Thank you very much for what you've just told me. We are here in good faith. Mining, as you know, is a very important part of the economy for your country. And we feel that we have a lot of benefits to bring to your community as well. We understand that it means a lot of change, but change is hugely important when we're looking at the bigger picture. My goal today is to, where possible, see where we can address at least some of your concerns for the community, that we can make this more of a project between the locals and the mine. However, that we are here to do a job. It's not a permanent situation. We will be eventually moving on. We hope many benefits that we can bring to the community as well. And the disruptions that we have been experiencing have been unacceptable. We cannot continue with that. And that is one thing that I very, very much want addressed in this mediation process today, if possible. It's clear that we have been bringing in workers from outside of the land, outside of the country, foreigners, foreign workers, but the workers that we are bringing in are very experienced and trained, and so quite simply our operations can't take place unless we have a skilled workforce and a skilled personnel that understand the industry working for us. So this is vital that the community understands that, and of course this takes us into another category of how we can sort of work alongside your community and hopefully bring a better equilibrium between us. There's various areas of discussion here that we're very open and willing to go into and to look at.
So let me see whether I can summarize. There are several things that are very important to you. One is that you want to lower the amount of disruption and disagreement and tensions between the company and the community and the actions that are connected with those. You would like the community to recognize that although they may not love what has happened, that the government has recognized the mine as having a legal right to be there, and that you want to have operations so that you can essentially have a productive mine and the income that produces for the company, for the government. And one of the things that is in place, but I understand that there's been a problem in doing this, there is a rule that some of the money has to come back to the community, and we need to assure that actually happens.
We can do that,
so we can discuss that.
Of course.
You'd like to figure out a way that there can be some joint benefit that you create for the company and the community, and that you minimize problems for the community, and there's a commitment to try to do that.
Yes.
And that you're looking at not only the short term, but you're looking for medium and also long term, because the mine won't be here forever.
It won't.
And so you need to have something that both creates a positive impact while you're here, and there's some kind of legacy, a positive legacy.
It would be great to have a positive legacy, but also I do need to stress that we do need to be able to get on with our jobs.
Yeah,
we do need to be able to get on with our work.
Okay.
And the confrontations have been way more than we had previously imagined. This is going to be something that we're not going to be able to work alongside.
Okay. Anything I've missed?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your opening comments and sharing a bit about your views about where we should go and the kinds of things that we should discuss. When we took the break, I wrote down some of your ideas and have created an agenda, which I'll show you in just a minute. And so what I would like to do is to see whether this is what you really want to talk about. And we'll also talk some about the sequence that we might do that. So here is the agenda. And we have to have the topics that you want to discuss that you think are important. And I may or may not have gotten them correctly, but these are the things that I think that you mentioned. One is hiring, and there are some ways to approach hiring, and I put some subtopics underneath that, and they may be different, but one is, are there any principles that are important for you in hiring? The types of jobs that might be appropriate, and I know that one of the things you're concerned with, the principles, has to do with local versus people from outside. The qualifications that would be needed for particular kinds of jobs, a strategy for doing training where that's needed, and then a little bit about the timeline. When might these kinds of things happen? So that's an idea of how we might talk about hiring. So these are some of the things that you mentioned, and I wonder, have you thought of either any additional things that we should put in here or clarifications? And then what we can do is also talk a little bit about the sequence of discussing them. So are there other things that ought to be on there?
Compensation.
Okay. Say a little bit more about compensation.
Well, what are we getting? Like, what incentives are we getting from the company?
Could you say a little bit more of that?
Like, for instance, a football field. We could build a football field. And also upgrading the schools with technology.
Okay, so that's another one to discuss. So let's talk about the sequencing. I do think it's important to say a little bit more about this. And then we have some very specific issues that we could work on to see that we can find some solutions. What do you think?
Communication to be moved up to the top because that's been lacking from the beginning.
Okay, so communication would happen before we discuss
Yes.
particulars on hiring or security or medical or whatever.
Yes, I do think we have a communication issue.
Okay, all right. Anything else? Shall we talk about communication first and then we'll look at these other things?
I think that would be preferable.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about what is it that you're looking for in communication? What kind of issues or problems or concerns is good communication going to address?
Well, primarily from the company's perspective, we have found that we've not been getting clear communication with you as to what your grievances are exactly. Obviously, you have many, and they are mostly being demonstrated in forms of protest and similar behavior. We have been sending written communication to the local government and what have you, perhaps that hasn't been fairly shared with the local community members.
Well, that we actually get approached. Again, you said you sent it to the government, but we're not the government. We are a community, and we're not receiving that. And you plow through, and that's what we feel has been going on. We want more transparency. We want written reports, so we can eliminate false information and have actual validable facts that can be checked and followed through. Also, what we would like to have is we want a town hall every 3 to 4 months, so that we have a liaison from the company and communicating with the community so we know what's going on from the horse's mouth and not through second means of channel.
So one of the questions is, there's a general way of trying to focus on a particular problem, and is what is needed, when is it needed, where does it go, and how do you do it? So one of the questions, what is needed, you're saying that the community needs to have some way to raise their concerns, have them explained or shared with the company, and the company getting a response back to you
Yes.
about the concern. And it can be done by town halls. It can be done by a lot of other ways. We can talk about one of the ways. But I think that the key is that you want to get this information both directions about what you want. You're saying that some of it is important that it be in written form,
yes,
so that you get that. It has to go directly to the community as opposed to through the local government. And we know that sometimes children play a game called telephone, where one person whispers something and it goes around, and everyone whispers it, and by the time it gets back to the first person, it doesn't sound anything like what the first person said. So we want to avoid that kind of communication, so that there is some kind of direct forum. So here are several things, okay? What is, you want information and you want grievances. If there is a grievance, there's a mechanism to raise that and have a response. And that what is wanted by the company is clarity, which I assume the community also wants those things.
Yes.
There needs to be some kind of local community contact as opposed to...
In an official capacity.
In an official, okay. That's an official one. Okay. We haven't talked a little bit other than what you talked about, this town hall, and if there was a town hall or if there's some kind of communication, how frequently that happens. We can talk about that in a minute. And then how? What's the form? Some of it could be oral, but some of it could be written. But the question is, what is it that you particularly need to address the specific issue? Let's talk about this, the local community contact. Who might that be? And is it an individual? Is it a local community committee? Is it something else?
We could initialize or initiate a local community committee, so that there are many points of access for the community to reach out to.
Yes.
And then if there's a liaison that we can speak with, then we can transmit that information to the liaison. They can bring that directly to you.
Yes, we could even go as far as to say that we could perhaps quarterly attend these committee meetings. And I would suggest that in advance of that, we could send a written report each time we feel like there is a significant update that needs to be shared with the community.
I think that'd be very beneficial, because then
Yes.
at least it shows some transparency, and then we can relay that information to the community.
Yes. But regarding the town hall, this is really an option that I think would be shut down quite quickly if I was to take that back. We feel that we do not want to give too much opportunity to have free-for-alls with people expressing their opinions and their thoughts, and this can become quite disruptive. Certainly nothing that would help with the maintenance of our company profile. I hope you can understand that that is not really the background that we come from.
Here's some things that you mentioned. One is you want a local community contact that's official, that they are the ones who really do represent the community.
Yes, please.
And what you said is that you would appoint a committee, so it's several people, and actually this is best practices for communication between companies and communities. You have multiple contact points so that people in the community can go out and talk to a particular person they're comfortable with, or will be able to articulate their concerns, raise the concern of the company. When you suggested you could have quarterly meetings, we haven't decided what is that quarterly meeting, but there would be some kind of formal meeting every quarter to either relay information, ask questions, and so forth. We'll separate out the grievance for a minute, because that's something else. And then how, you can have a forum. It could be either an oral presentation or written reports. You could have written reports for updates, either before a committee meeting, or if you decide to do some kind of town hall, this is still open. You'd have a written report maybe beforehand so that people would have an idea, and then they'd be able to respond. So those are some things that you've mentioned. Are these things that you can either like, or you can live with as ways that you would move forward on communications?
I mean, many people may be a little disgruntled that we can't have town halls, but if we have the committee, I'm sure we can persuade them that it is a way to move forward, and we could get them on board with that.
By sending you written reports, updates, it's not just of what we're doing that possibly may aggrieve you, as opposed to bringing forward, positives too, which you can then put into discussion with the community, and then by us coming along, sending representatives to your meetings, we can develop the positives as well as address the negatives.
Mm-hmm. So what we've talked about so far, and this is quarterly committee meetings that involve the company and the community. So these are joint meetings. If we do some of these things, would that begin to address some of the community things, with the exception of grievance, because grievances are different? These things will deal with either information exchange, both directions, and it will deal with questions and answers, or a question that the company has to go back and focus on. But it's mostly information and questions. So would this help address that concern? And if it is, then we can also talk about what the next steps are for looking at grievances.
That would alleviate a lot of the concern. It will instill a little bit more trust, and I believe that will be extremely helpful for the community.
Please note, however, that however open these communication channels are, and we will endeavour to be more upfront with our information relaying, etc. Communication and decision making are not the same thing, and I think it's really important that we stress this, that often we will still be proceeding with our plans.
So what you're looking at is that input is different than making the decision, and that on many instances, the mind will have the final decision-making authority. Right now, it's Monday, so can we suggest that by Friday, each of you communicate back and forth who's the point of contact for if there is anything that's between these quarterly meetings, or a meeting that might be called as needed in between, and it's different than probably a crisis meeting or an extra special meeting. But this is the contact, okay?
Perfect.
Okay,
thank you.
Fine. Okay, I think we should take a break, and then we'll come back and maybe look at some of the other issues that you've raised on the agenda and see that we can make some progress there.
Sounds like a good
Okay?
idea.
Thank you.
So we had, I think, a productive last discussion on communications, and we got a variety of good understandings and some agreements on what you're going to do, both what the company is going to do to improve communications, what the community is going to do to improve the communications with the company. So I would suggest we move and talk about one of the other issues. And early on, you talked about really the importance of, I've got up here hiring, but it's really employment that you're talking about. And you raised a variety of things about employment, both for local community people and also issues about workers who came from outside of the community, and what's important for each of you. So I'd like to just go back and have each of you talk a bit about what is important around the issue of employment for people at the mine. And maybe we'll start with the company initially on here, because when you're looking for people, you're looking for probably particular kinds of people. So can you say a little bit more about what's important for the company that would enable you to consider potential changes in the hiring practices or potential changes in who's working at the mine?
So obviously, for a fair employment process and to treat everybody equally, we do need to be making sure that we're employing people of adequate educational standards. And it would seem that the community is a little bit maybe slower in, well, how do I say this? They only have a very basic understanding of how the corporation is working, and less than adequate qualifications, I think, is very clear. And so, we have to understand that these people...
enough of this. You're just going to let her go on badmouth us like this. Who were you hired by? This is I don't know. I think there's something going on with this.
So you're concerned that I am not treating you equally or respectfully?
You're letting her badmouth us. You're just letting it go on. You're not correcting her. You're not telling her to stop. You're just letting it happen. And
so one of the things.
One
of the things that you need is for me to intervene and to stop when there are comments that are going back and forth that are not respectful.
Yes.
Okay.
Because that was on the board or unrespectful.
I will certainly do my best. One of the things that I think is important is that you do get a chance to talk with each other, but it has to be done in a respectful manner. But I also want you, if you feel strongly about something, you need to feel free to express that, okay? Which is fine with me. However, if either of you feel attacked by the other, I will try to intervene and try to stop. And I ask that if I do that you will also stop doing what you're doing. And we'll just take a breather. Or the other thing is if you need a break, or I might need a break, then we'll go ahead and take that break and then we'll come back and talk. But I think one of the goals is to have as respectful a dialogue as possible.
Certainly going forward, we would be very open to hiring members of the local community. However, they must have commitment and the qualifications that we require. These are non-negotiable, and we realize that your community is covering all forms of work, but we have achieved a very high global reputation, and it's very important for us that we continue with our standards. We, at the moment, are not 100% sure that we can trust what qualifications you say you have, whether they match the qualifications that we are requiring. And as open as we are, we still need to feel that we are being taken very seriously on this. There are very high levels of ability required, certainly for our specialist engineers, our machine operators, a lot of our management team. We have chemical specialists, and these jobs cannot just be filled by, enthusiastic amateurs.
So let's hear from the community. What's important to you about the employment issues here?
The employment issues, the employment benefits the community. If our community isn't working, and then it will kill our community. Yes. And now we're not saying that you will take a farmhand and make them CEO. However, I'm saying there are many opportunities where people of course, would verify and make sure that they are capable of doing the job, are given opportunities to work. It gives them regular income. It gives them a better sense of self. Yes. It allows them to see how they're contributing to the betterness of the company and also the community. It compensates for the inconvenience of having a mine here.
There's several pieces of this. For local community members, it provides them with income, yes, so that they can support themselves and their family. Psychologically, it's important for them and that they're recognized as people who can contribute both to their community and to the company.
Yes.
And so those are things that we want to look at when we're exploring, hiring and increasing or expanding the number of local people who would be working with the company. So let's look a little bit about some of the types of jobs and some of the interests that you have or concerns you have about types of jobs where community members might want to work. And you were saying you're not expecting someone to become the CEO if they don't have that kind of background. But let's look at the types of jobs. We'll look at then what kind of qualifications people might need to have for those and what would be done to try to get the qualifications. What's your thinking about that?
Well, we are at full capacity at the moment, so obviously we cannot think about getting rid of some of our workers to put locals in the positions. That's something that would just cause a lot of tensions within our workplace. As we continue through into operations, as you've just mentioned, certainly on a ground level, or should I say below level, this area of manual workers actually on the pit face, construction workers, we will certainly be needing I would say close on 50 new employees in that direction. Yes.
In both categories, because you got manual and then you have construction.
In the manual,
which is the pit.
Hands-on pit work, thereabouts. That may include perhaps 10 potential drivers or people working more on the surface, but again, in a physical capacity.
Is this for the short term or the long term? Because we're looking more at around 200. It's only 5% of our community, but 200 people working in the mines. Then it allows integration of the workers who you're bringing in to the community, and also it allows our community to see that an actual effort is being made to help with the survival of the community.
As we continue with the excavation of the mine, of course, this is going to the number of workers will most likely increase. It's hard to say at this present moment, but that is something we predict.
It's up to you, because to some extent, the timing depends upon you identifying people, getting those people to you going through a hiring process, and then actually bringing them on. And the timing is also dependent upon when you need them.
Yes.
So the sooner you do this, the better. And that we need to educate people that because they have been recommended by you does not mean that they're automatically getting jobs.
Exactly.
But this is a first step. Well, we've had some good and I think some productive talks over this last period of time, and I think we've gotten some significant agreements on several areas. One was the communications, both ways to improve two-way communication, the forums where you're going to do that, some of the timing, the formats, whether you're going to be oral or written. And it will provide an opportunity for the exchange of information two ways, one from the community to the company about either requests for information or asking questions per se, and for the company to get information from the community about what the community is concerned about. The other thing that we've looked at is the question of hiring and employment, and how important that is for the community to have people in the community have jobs, and both to have an income for their self-esteem and to have their feeling that they're connected with the company and that the company is part of the community. And the company's agreed that you will provide certain kinds of jobs to local community people. We looked at both short-term employment, not the length of time, but how rapidly this would happen, somewhere between 3 and 6 months, and looking at different kinds of jobs that would become open based upon current skills that people in the community have. So we've looked at some short-term employment in the areas of manual labor, administrative, secretarial, drivers, and things like that. We looked at longer-term hiring issues, which were ones that would probably require additional training. The local community has agreed to set up a committee which would essentially look at potential candidates who would like to work for the company. You will look at their qualifications, their character, and this would be a way to essentially have some kind of an employment record, and then you would make referrals to the company. And those people would go through the normal hiring process, and that hiring, there will be priority of local people if they're qualified to do the job, so that it will not be hiring people from outside. So the local candidates essentially will have a special criteria for them, because it's important that community people be able to work in the mine, and the mine have local community people working there. So those were, I think, the majority of things that we looked at. I missed something that I might have missed in the summary of what we're doing.
No, I think you covered
We'll be
everything.
meeting again, probably maybe next week. We can talk about what time is available, and that we'll be looking at some of the other issues that you've raised. We'll be looking at essentially security needs of the mine and how that relates to employment of local people, and what kind of qualifications, what kind of training and stuff, the other things might be needed to address the need for the mine for security, and how that relates to hiring local people. So those are the things that I think that we've talked about today, and I hope that we'll continue to have productive discussions as we go. And if you have concerns between now and the next meeting, please feel free to contact me. And if you think of other issues or topics that we need to discuss, or if you go back and talk with your community members, and you talk with your colleagues in the company, and they have either concerns or issues or things they want discussed, give me a heads up. I will also be in contact with you to work on developing the agenda for our next meeting, so we'll have one when we come in. So I'll give you a call, and I probably will go out and meet you at the community, and we'll figure out a way that we can get your input so that it's your agenda. So thank you so much for coming again. I appreciate it. Thank you for your involvement and time and commitment. I know this is not always easy to schedule this amount of time and energy, but it's been very helpful for me to hear you and to have you get a chance
super
to talk.
helpful. Thank you so very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again. I'll see you next time.
Yes.
I hope you have a good rest of your week, and
Thank you so much.
you get to do all of your homework, meeting with your colleagues and your committees, and getting ready for our next session.
Thank you, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you.
I'll see you next time.